Hello, it's me, Mr. Nichols. Well, guys, last poem. We're talking about Eliot today. Not really talking a lot about Eliot himself. I mean, when things pop up, it'll be fine. But we're going to talk about the one poem, Love Song of Alfred Prufrock. The name that you would obviously always want to associate with a love song. It's the last poem, last quiz. You've already done the discussion post. I haven't read those yet since you haven't done them yet. But I assume they were something along the lines of, what the heck is happening in this poem? He seems so depressed. He seems in love. Seems like a song of love. His name seems very Prufrocky. So, I'm going to read this poem first. I like to read this poem out loud. It's really weird. It goes on a long time. Takes about 7 minutes to read. Sometimes I do it dramatically. Sometimes I just try to get through it. We'll see what that is this time. And then we'll talk about it. Or I will talk about it because you aren't here. If you were here, you wouldn't talk about it anyway. I like it when people talk about it, but Gen Z don't talk. You're not talkers. I think it's because you get so beaten down over many years of being told not to talk. I'm like, we don't have time to talk, guys. We have multiple choice questions to get through. Stop it. So, here we go. I don't know Italian. I just always mow through it. Love Song of Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot. Se io credesse che mia risposta fosse e persone che ti mai tornasse al mondo, che esta fiamma staria senza piescosi. Ma persi occhi, che mai di che fondo, non trovo io alcun, se lo vero, senza temere infame ti rispondo. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights and one-night cheap hotels, and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. Do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. In the room the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of evening, laying upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. And indeed there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon the window panes. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. Time to murder and create, and time for all the works and days and hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Time for you, and time for me, and time yet for 100 indecisions, and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. And indeed, there will be time to wonder, do I dare? And do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. They will say, how his hair is growing thin. My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest, inserted by a simple pin. They will say, how his arms and legs are thin. Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there is time for decisions and revisions which a minute will reverse. For I have known them all already, known them all. Known the evenings, the mornings, the afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. I know the voice is dying with a dying fall beneath the music from a farther room. So how should I presume? And I have known the eyes already, known them all. The eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase. And when I am formulated, sprawling on a pen, when I am pinned and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin to spell out all the dividends of my days and ways? And how should I presume? And I've known the arms already, known them all. The arms are braceleted and white and bare, but in the lamplight, down with light brown hair. Is it perfume from my dress that makes me so digress? Arms that lie along a table or wrap about a shawl. And should I then presume? And how should I begin? Shall I say, I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows? Should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. In the afternoon, the evening sleeps so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, or it malingers, stretched on the floor here beside you and me. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? But though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I have seen my head, grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet. And here is no great matter. I have seen the moment of my greatness flicker. And I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker, and in short, I was afraid. It would have been worth it after all. After the cups, the marmalade, the tea, among the porcelain, among some talk of you and me, to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it towards some overwhelming question, to say, I am Lazarus, come back from the dead, come back to tell you all. I shall tell you all. If one, settling a pillow by her head, should say, that is not what I meant at all. That is not it. At all. And would it have been worth it, after all? Would it have been worthwhile, after the sunsets and the dooryards and the sprinkled streets, after the novels, after the teacups, after the skirts that trail on the floor, and this, and so much more, it is impossible to say just what I mean. But as if a magic lantern threw the nerves in patterns on a screen. Would it have been worthwhile if one, settling a pillow or throwing off a shawl and turning toward the window, should say, that is not it at all. That is not what I meant at all. No, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. Am an attendant lord, one that will do to swell a progress, start a scene or two, advise the prince, No doubt an easy tool, deferential, glad to be of use, politic, cautious, and meticulous. Full of high sentence, but a bit obtuse. At times, indeed, almost ridiculous. Almost, at times. The fool. I grow old. I grow old. I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Shall I part my hair behind? Do I dare to eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. I have seen the mermaids singing each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me. I've seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown black when the wind blows the water white and black. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea, by sea-girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown. Till human voices wake us, and we drown. So, yeah, I decided to go dramatic with it. I don't know, I'm just trying to imagine, how does the guy get from one line to the next? What goes on in his head? How do you go from one idea to the next? It really does seem like this poem, when I read it, almost like a mosaic of sorts. A little background on this poem. And this is true of, I think, The Wasteland, too, which is a poem that happens in Britlit 2. We also read this in Britlit 2. Those of you who end up taking me for that class, maybe in the summer, or if the world ever returns to normal, a fall. Or no, I'm sorry, a spring. But something that Eliot was really into. Okay, weird background for Eliot. So, there were some people who were expatriates, people who used to be in one country, now they're in another. Auden was one of those that around World War II, he decided to go from England to America. He lived in America. Whereas other people like Frost, America, went to England, published poetry, then came back to America. Eliot's one of those where he went to Harvard. I think he even got a doctorate at Harvard. Then he goes to England and stays, and I believe lives there for the rest of his life. Meets a guy called Ezra Pound at some point, who helps him work on, I think, Love Song of Alfred Prufrock, but especially The Wasteland. And while he's there, he starts working for Lloyd's Bank, I think, in London. So he's really into financial district. But one of the things that he was very good at that bank, what he would do is he would read newspapers from around the world, and he would translate the financial information from around the world into English. So he knew all kinds of languages, so he could read them. But when he was, I believe, in America, maybe this was in England too, I don't know, but one of his favorite art forms was music hall. And music hall was a lot like, what's the comparison these days? America's Got Talent. Imagine that instead of having a judging competition, it was just that was just the evening. You go out and it's people do different acts, and there's no competition. It's just people do different acts, and you go in and you watch, and it was a a lot of what we have today of like the old, you ever seen the old school movie theaters? It looks like it's in some sort of like weird little chamber type thing, like an old theater. That is because it used to be a music hall type of theater. I gotta hurry home. Music hall theater. So the way music hall would work is it was like a bunch of different types of skits. Sometimes it was comedy. Sometimes it was like a skit you laughed at. Sometimes it was a speech from a Shakespeare play. Sometimes it was music. Sometimes multiple people doing music. Sometimes the singing, an orchestra. All kinds of different displays were put on one after the other. And Eliot loved these. He thought it was like a really high art form. I think he thought it was a high art form. If not, he just found it to be a compelling art form. I think a lot of what Eliot did for poetry sort of made its way into the way that we watch. I think it made its way into sort of Faulkner and the way that Faulkner approached literature. Lots of different perspectives, jumping around between perspectives. Also the way like even a show like Family Guy these days is possible because of something like this and The Wasteland. As you have different scenes playing out and then like you cut away and you come back and you cut away and you come back. Those types of things are possible and we're able to understand those sorts of things these days. In part in film because of Citizen Kane, but of course this was influenced by Citizen Kane as well. Y'all don't really know Citizen Kane, but it's so weird. You watch it today and you're like, wow, this movie is kind of boring. It seems just like a standard film, but it's jumping around different perspectives, jumping through time, interviewing people. Those interviews become part of the story. Unreliable narrators. It was all new stuff for way back then. But I think that Eliot was one of the primary movers of this sort of modernist movement. And really toying with what can we get away with in poetry and what can people still understand. So that kind of gives you some background on why it's set up like this, almost like a mosaic with little pieces that are set next to each other that we sort of like, what does this mean together? And here's what I think, that's the background, but getting to the poem itself and the explanation, here's kind of what I think it's trying to say, essentially, the basics. One, this is me. This is my interpretation. This is not necessarily the interpretation. This is how I see it. So probably most of the questions on the quiz will be about what did Nichols say he thought about blank. And so one of the things is I think that he's wanting to fall in love with a woman. It makes it sound at first like he wants to have intercourse with a woman. I think that's playing off of the old ideas of old poetry. We read To His Coy Mistress earlier in the semester where he's very much acting like he wants to have sex with a woman. And y'all might have remembered the one where it was like he was saying, if I don't take your virginity, the worms will, that poem. It's actually referenced specifically in this poem. And I think that he is very much making it sound like he wants to have sex with a woman, but I think more than that, he wants companionship. He wants acceptance by a woman. And I think the other big thing that's going on here is he wants to write a great poem. I don't know why Alfred Prufrock has been made a poet. I don't know if it's just because the poet Eliot is a poet, and he said, well, I'll write a perspective of somebody who wants to fall in love and be a poet. But I have to see both of these things going on. And I'll explain why and where these things come from. At first, I just see somebody who wants to fall in love, and then I see the poetry thing, and then I see how parallel they are in trying to get somebody to love you and in trying to write something that could become famous or be worthwhile. There are some parallels here. Love and writing are very paralleled, especially in a scenario where you have so much anxiety and self-doubt, which hopefully anybody who's reading this could see massive amounts of anxiety and self-doubt. A little bit of paranoia, too, about how he's going to be perceived. So that kind of bleeds through the poem, I think, and this sort of sense of depression and sadness about the prospects of life. I think that comes out even if you're not really sure what he's saying. So let's start out here, and it says, with the Italian part here, this "Seo credesse che mi risposta fosse persona." He says, I think this is essentially a rough translation. I don't have the book right in front of me, but I'm pretty close. If I thought that I would be saying this to a person who would ever go back to the world, then this flame would cease to shake entirely. It was a guy who was enveloped in flame who was talking, and the flame itself would shake when he would talk. He said, but since I know that nobody ever does return to the world from where I am, then I can, if that is true, I can tell you the truth without fear of infamy. And this is so weird because it's told by Guido de Montefeltro to Dante. And this is in Dante's Inferno, or Dante's Divine Comedy, one of the two. In fact, Dante's Inferno, I think, is in the Divine Comedy. But Dante, like, I think he's going looking for his, like, love. I'd never read Dante's Inferno, but this is from what I know of it. He goes down into hell looking for his love and to bring her back. But basically, he's on, like, essentially like a tour of hell. And I think Dante's Inferno is actually the story of Dante. The character is named Dante. He's telling the story later. And he asked this guy, like, what is your shameful story? He's like, what's your story? What's got you here? Why are you enveloped in this flame? It looks very painful down in hell. And the guy says, well, if I thought you'd ever go tell anybody in the real world, I wouldn't tell you. But since nobody ever returns to the real world from hell, I'll go ahead and tell you. He's like, what is it going to matter if I tell you a secret when we're all going to be returning to the world anyway? Or nobody's going to return to the world ever. We're always stuck down here anyway, so I can tell you. It doesn't matter. Not realizing that he's literally telling the one guy who could tell everybody, because he is going back to the world, his secrets. It's like telling one person your secret, and it turns out that person is a journalist who works for, like, the New York Times or something. It's just like, oh, whoops. So that's how we start out this poem. I guess it's like Prufrock is telling us the shameful story that he has, the embarrassing story that he shouldn't be telling us, because then it's going to get out and everybody will know. And it's kind of true. I mean, we all know it. But he says here, and let's break down these images and how awkward it all is. Here's Prufrock's actual story. So let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. The guy is trying to think. He's talking to, I think, a woman he's walking with. If you're going to compare the evening to something, like the evening is spread against the sky, like what? Like moon sand on a black ocean or something like that? No. He says, like a patient etherized upon a table. So the sky is so tranquil that it reminds him of this. See, there's no movement. That's his romantic image of the sky? It's so weird. So he's already awkward. It's like, wow, the night is as still as death. Like, how does that get somebody, I don't know, in the mood? He says, let's go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights and one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. This is not the best side of town. It's half-deserted streets. So, like, the streets are usually in town. It's in the city, bustling, right? There's only a lot of people there. These are half-deserted. So there's not a whole lot of people there. So it's got to be, like, nighttime, sometime when, you can't get work done. This is back when people during the daytime worked, and then when it got dark, they stopped. Because that's what you did. And it was the muttering retreats. I don't know. Imagine, like, where would you hear muttering in the streets? To me, it sounds like either crazy people or, like, you just hear, like, little. It's not a bustling, noisy, lively time. It's a time where you hear, like, little mutterings. Kind of creepy-ish. And it says, of restless nights and one-night cheap hotels. So around them are these little hotels. It says one-night cheap hotels. So they're hotels that are cheap. They don't cost much. And you only go there for a night. Now, keep in mind, this is a time when people had to come a long way to go to a hotel. Or you lived in one long term until you moved away. So like now we have the monthly rate hotels. That was kind of the standard back then for a lot of people because they would come to town and they would spend a significant amount of time there. It was almost called like a boarding house. But these hotels, you'd stay like a weekend or so. But he's talking about ones where you would stay just one night. Think of it like in Dallas. I think there's sometimes, if I'm not mistaken, I think there are hotels that you rent by the hour. You're not gonna you don't get a room at a hotel for an hour or two if you're thinking about I just need to get a good night's rest. It's not what that's for. It's for doing some shady stuff. Either you got yourself like a prostitute or some drugs you need to do out of the public's eye. That's what you use an hour hotel for. And it's the same here. Like you're only coming to town for one night if you're going to be doing some shady stuff. That's why he says restless nights. You're going to be doing some stuff you're not supposed to be doing, whatever that is. Whatever that is. All right, sorry, I yawned. And then sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. I believe it means like a seafood restaurant where they just didn't really have the money for like soap and water to clean the floors every night, so they had like sawdust they'd bring in daily, and like as the oyster juices and fish juices like dripped on the floor throughout the day, they would at the end of the shift they would just sweep it all up. The sawdust would absorb it and they'd sweep it up. It's not really cleaning the floor so much as absorbing the nastiness, and then the sawdust has like that fragrance, so it like kind of covers it up a bit. No, it's not the cleanest side of town basically. And then it says, so I mean, think about why you would take a girl to that side of town, right? It says streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent. So what is a tedious argument? Think about the argument that guys always make to girls, right? Historically speaking, and I'm talking about stereotypically, it's the come on baby argument, like please. He's very. It's not necessarily like he's making that argument. He's setting the tone for such an argument of insidious intent. So it's an intent that's kind of shady. And he says to lead you to an overwhelming question. And it's sort of like into his coy mistress. He sets up this: if I could love you in all the ways I would want to, I would do this. But he's not even broaching the subject of love. He's just taking her to his side of the town, and she's like, "Well, what question?" And he's like, "Oh, don't ask what is it. Let's just go make our visit." So I don't even think it sounded at first like he brought her to that side of town on purpose to take her somewhere. But then we have this reveal here, like, let us go and make our visit. Our visit. So, okay. So we've come to this town for a reason. And in the room, the women come and go talking Michelangelo. What I get from that, if you have in the room, the women come and go talking Michelangelo, there's a central room. There's some little bedrooms. People are off having conversations. It reminds me like a house party or something. But if you're on that side of the town, it's like where you want to seem bohemian. You want to seem like you're artsy-fartsy. But you can't afford a good place. So you're like on the other side. It reminds me of grad students in the English department. Or like they all want to seem like they're so cultured, but they all live in some, rickety house on the bad side of town. And they, drink wine out of glasses they bought at Walmart. And I don't know, wear neck scarves to feel fancy. But you're still just somebody who is 2 steps out of well, I don't want to say it that way. It's something I heard in a movie once. You're like 2 steps out of the trailer thinking that you're in a mansion or something. Am I allowed to say that? Because I grew up in a single wide mobile home with holes in the floor that we had plywood on. Because one time we were walking and just fell to the kitchen floor. That's not good, so we had to get some plywood, put it down. My mom did not like that. So he's at this party, and I honestly think what happens here, because how is he in the room, and the women are coming and going talking to Michelangelo, and they're like, "Oh yes, I love Michelangelo. Have you seen his sculpture? Yes. Which one? The one with the marble." The David or that chap, I think, the naked chap. And I think he's looking out a window. If you go to a party as an introvert, the kind of artsy type, and an introvert, and somebody who would like to fall in love, but we don't really know that he can't yet, but we're getting toward that. He's awkward. We know that. So an awkward person at a party, what do? They stand around, they look at, there's no phones. So he's like, oh, look, a window. So he goes and looks out the window. And there's a yellow fog, right? So there's a yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes. There's a yellow fog close to the windows. But this is the part where I start thinking he's also a writer, right? So he says the yellow smoke that rubbed its muzzle on the window panes. He has fog, changed it for smoke. Fog is the literal, smoke is the figurative. Smoke is mysterious. Fog is just the condensation. It says rubbed its back versus rubbed its muzzle. So that's very clearly an animal. When you say muzzle, animal. Back, anything has a back. When you say fog that rubs its back, it could be a dude going like this. But if it's fog that rubs its muzzle, it's something that's nuzzling. It says licked its tongue to the corners of evening. whatever that means. Lingered upon the pools that stand in drains. He's looking at the smoke and wherever it sits. Let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys. Okay, so soot is coming out of chimneys. It's burning, so it's landing on like the smoky fog, going through that yellow fog. It's yellow because this is back, I think, when electricity was available, but like the kind of electricity they had would have been heavy tungsten electricity. So it's essentially like electricity on incandescent light, not like the LEDs that we have now or fluorescence, but it was essentially an intentionally made shorting out of electricity. It created light by heating something to the point where it was shorting out, but it was a controlled short. If that doesn't make any sense, maybe. Like the thing that usually is a very bad thing in electricity, they did on purpose to create light. So what is the gas that they have in old light bulbs that would keep the tungsten from burning? Argon? Was that it? Maybe. I can't remember. How'd they even get argon gas back then to keep it from burning? How do you do that? Like, where did you find it? So it's a very, very yellowish, dark yellowish light. Slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing it was a soft October night, curled once about the house, fell asleep. So it's kind of a fall image of like smoke, but it's the more that mysterious, like thinking of like how you might see like a painting of a cat in lamplight on Halloween. That's kind of how I get the look. And it's a cat-like smoke, right? It's like a big cat. Curls about the house, falls asleep. And it's a beautiful like image, I think, that he creates. And I like the way it all sounds, and like the S's and the T's and the P's, giving it that light sound of like a cat. Slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that was a soft October night. See, it's very light and trippy. Not, traipsing, I guess is what I should say, not trippy. Lightly trips. And he's kind of confident here, I think, in the moment. He says, there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides on the street, and there's going to be time to do that. I can write that great poem. I'll continue it later. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces you meet. So, like you know what I mean. Like, when you go and you see somebody, like, hey, how you doing? Fine, how are you? You have to act kind of that fakeness, you know. So he said, prepare a face. Oh, hi. Be time to murder and create. And I think this is the poem again, like talking with characters, you murder them, you create them. Like that's the act of creation for poems. Time for all the works and days of hands, everything that goes, and that's also a reference to the Theogony by Hesiod. Time for you, time for me. So he's like all the time in the world. So he's essentially kind of doing the same thing that it happens in two his coy ministers, talking about how much time they have. We have lots of time. It's just a totally differently structured argument. But nose really itchy. And he says, time for you, time for me, time yet for 100 indecisions. This is my other writing clue. And for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. And I think, oh, he's already done a revision. Because he starts up there on his writing, fog, change it to smoke, back muzzle. He's like, yellow fog, rose muzzle. No, he's like, no, how about the yellow smoke that rose muzzle? So he fixes it. And so he says 100 visions and revisions. Oh, he wants to write a great poem. And he wants to like plan out with this girl, like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. And like, if it doesn't work, we can do it again. You know, it's like, I'll get it right eventually. But then something happens here. And I think he gets called back to reality. Notice how there's that one repeating line in the room. So he's looking out the window. He's thinking, yeah. And then he gets snapped back. Oh, right. Yeah, I'm still just in a room. I'm not going over there and talking to anybody. I'm just over here. And like he hasn't been paying attention, right? Have you ever not paying attention at a party and like you hear some giggling maybe that calls you back to reality? And he's like, and indeed there will be time to wonder, do I dare? And no, honestly, do I dare? I'll turn back to send the stare. He's like, oh, well, okay, I'm gonna go talk to him. But he's like with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. And they'll say, well, how his hair is growing thin. He's like, no, I'm gonna have my morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, like looking really nice with a tie. Started by a simple pin too, like it's gonna look nice. But he says they'll say, oh, how his arms and legs are thin. He can't imagine a scenario where he looks nice and they don't make fun of him. He says, do I dare disturb the universe? Like, do I dare try to write? Do I try to approach her? In a minute, there is time for decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse. Oh, no. So he's thinking, there's time for decisions and revisions. No big deal. He says, but what if those decisions and revisions I make, another minute can reverse? Oh, this is setting himself up for failure, essentially. He's worrying about even the fact that he'll be able to change things if he gets them wrong. So it's already problematic. It kind of reminds me of Frost's Road Not Taken, but at a much longer stretch. And I think it has a truer emotional core. And he says, for I have known them all, have known the evenings, mornings, afternoons, measured out my life with coffee spoons. It's a sad, plodding, methodical, repetitive existence. Measured out my life with coffee spoons. Monday's coffee, Tuesday's coffee, Wednesday's coffee, Thursday's coffee, Friday's coffee. That's a week of me. He says, I know the voice is dying with the dying fall beneath music from a farther room. So I think he's come down the stairs, or he's thinking about coming down the stairs, and he's imagining like he hears voices dying with the dying fall. You know, like if you approach and people go, oh yeah, and then like, and they get real quiet, you're like, oh, they're talking about me, you know? He says, I know those voices dying with the dying fall beneath the music from a farther room. So how should I presume? Like, how do I presume to approach her? How do I presume to write if these people are just going to judge everything I do? He says, I've known the eyes already, the eyes that fix me in a formulated phrase. I'm formulated sprawling on a pin. If you were in a biology class, you know, like sometimes they'll have like where people like take bugs, or like they'll have bugs in like a display. And you take that pin and you put that through a bug, and he's like, and if I'm pinned, like he's tiny, and they're all examining him and judging him, and he's pinned on the wall, like, I am just a specimen. How should I begin to spit out all the butt ends of my days and ways? Here's my poem. It's a great poem. Please listen to me. And they're like, look at him and his tiny little arms and his bald head. So he thinks he won't be taken seriously because they'll just be examining him and his tiny. And if you look at like somebody like, he has a very valid concern, especially at these times. If you look at somebody like Keats, John Keats, very famous poet, one of the greatest poets, oh my gosh, what's the name of oh my gosh, the metaphysical poets? I don't know why it doesn't sound right now, but romantics. My gosh, I don't know why I couldn't think of that word. The romantic poets was John Keats, and he died at like 26 years old. He wrote great poetry in that very short time. He wrote from like 19, I think, to 24, 25, and just wrote amazing poetry. And he was judged by the critics for being poor, essentially. Like, they talked about how he came from like poor beginnings, and Shelley and Byron didn't have to worry about that because they both had like somewhat rich backgrounds and had traveled and things. But Keats was just, his family was poor, and he was sent out, apprenticed out to a doctor to become a doctor or a surgeon. And this was back when didn't have quite as much prestige. So like that was his. He was just gonna be a worker. He was gonna go out and like be a worker with his hands, like a technician. And then he knew Greek and like some other languages, and was like loved reading poetry and philosophers and stuff. And he was a very, very smart guy. Very quickly, he was. But he was made fun of, and he took it very hard when the critics didn't like his stuff. And so he's wondering too, like in this poem, like how can I spit out all the butt ends of my day? That's what he calls like his experiences and like conveying those to others. Spit out all the butt ends of my days and ways. So sad. He says, and how should I presume then to go forward? So the second time he's wondering, how should I presume? And he's like, and I've known those. And you never know, like he's saying, I have known them all. Like he's saying, there's an anxiety there, but also an ego there. Because anybody who is scared about what people think of them, there's also an ego that what you do matters to other people. Because I was one person, I think I gave my brother advice a long time ago, is because I was the opposite. I was scared to approach girls. My brother was too, but I wanted him to think that I wasn't. So, and I wanted him to have normal time approaching girls. So I said something like, "Why do you care?" Like he says, "What if I ask her out and she says no?" I said, "What if she does? You're the same after she says no as you were before. Like nothing has changed about you." And he was like, "My gosh, you're right." And he asked that girl out and he went on a date with her, which is not at all what I would have done. I would have gone, I have to be in the same grade as this girl, and it's gonna suck, and like she's gonna make fun of me, and all of her friends are gonna make fun of me. And that's how I was, and I was kind of like this guy. And so it was kind of funny that I gave him that advice. It's like I knew what I needed to do, I just couldn't do it. So I told my brother, and he did it. But he says, I know these people. I know what they're like, and they're gonna judge me. They're gonna worry about me so much. And he says, I know the arms already. They're braceleted in white and bare, but now he's thinking about how beautiful women are. He's like, but in the lamplight, they have little light brown hair on their arms, and he's like, is it the perfume from a dress that makes me so aggressive? So he's like thinking about the girls now. He's like, oh, it's so pretty. Girls are so pretty. Arms that lie along a table or like wrap about a shawl. He's like, that's so nice. And should I then presume? And how should I begin? So he's like, okay, let's make an action plan. So how should I presume? Forget that. Go past it. How should I begin with these women? How should I begin to approach her? Shall I say, and I think this is where he's going back to like writing the great poem. He's like, he's done the smoke part, now he's going to do the poem again. And if you look at the poem and how it's written right here, it's not very good. Shall I say, I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows. It just has this sing-songy, hippity-dippity quality. And the images aren't that great, like narrow streets, smoke, rises from pipes, lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows. I don't know, it's not a very romantic image like the smoke was. So it's almost like a guy like wearing his tank top after he's come home and he gets dirty. He's like smoking a cigarette or something out the window. Like, oh, that's gorgeous. And he doesn't like it. He says he dots because he sucks. He's like, I suck. I terrible. And then he starts thinking to himself, he's really the best. His most beautiful poetry comes in the rest of the poem when he's insulting himself or thinking badly of himself. He says, or when he's sad. He says, I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. And I did my hand like that when that part of the video, and I was ragged claws, something like this, scuttling across the floors of silent seas. Okay, so like, like a lobster or crustacean or something, right? Look at all the sounds that pop up in there. I told you earlier about the tripping lightly with the cat, like tip, 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 tip. This part is C's and L's and S's. And that's what makes that most of the sound. Claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. So it sounds like a crustacean, doesn't it? And I'm not doing that Visco girl weird laugh thing that I've seen online. Like I'm not doing that. That's what it is. The sound of scuttling. I was thinking of a song, but that's not the song. In the afternoon, so now I think he's sitting here and he's imagining himself being in the scenario where he's maybe going to be able to ask this girl, like, would you like to be my girlfriend or something? I think he's honestly sweeter, depressingly sweeter. Like he's not the alpha type where he's going to go for like, he's not going to jump in and be like, make love to me. He's not going to do that at all. There's no chance. He's not that guy. But there is a possibility that he is going to ask for a date, or perhaps we could be more than friends. That's what he wants. And he's so terrible at it, even his imagination. That's basically what happens. He says, in the afternoon, the evening sleeps so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, at malingers, stretched on the floor here beside you and me. So he's imagining this scenario. Should I, after tea, cakes, ices, so it's like they have this whole, like, let's just do a lot of things, and then like eventually we'll move on to have the strength to force the moment to its crisis. Its crisis? It's just like, do you want to go out? Like, that's it. That's all he has to say. They're spending time together. It says, though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, I've seen my head grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter. It reminds me of that moment from Ratatouille when, like, he's like, let's go out, let's do this! And, like, he busts out of the doors of the kitchen, everybody's like, and he's like, it's like, it's not that, he's making like this huge deal when it's just not. Wept and fasted, wept and prayed. Please. And like, you're gonna ask a girl on a date, that's it. Or like if she wants like, do you like me like that? You know, that's it. Says, though I've seen my head grown slightly bald brought upon a platter, I'm no prophet. Here's no great matter. That's John the Baptist. So he's imagining his head is on a platter of John the Baptist. His, the Herod has bring me the head of John the Baptist. Bring me the head of J. Alfred Prufrock. And he's like, it was bald head. More depressing. And he says, I've seen the moment my greatness flickered. I've seen eternal footman hold my. He's seen death holding his coat and saying, come on, buddy. So he's imagining his impending death from the prospect of asking a girl out. Dude, get over yourself. Would have been worth it after all the cups, marmalade, the teas, porcelain. Talk to me. He's trying to imagine the perfect scenario. Like we'll just make a perfect date in my head, and then it'll all work out. Would have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to have rolled towards some overwhelming question. That actually is to his coy mistress, to have squeezed the universe into a ball. This intensity of emotion here. To say, I am Lazarus. So he imagined himself, death is coming for him. And he's like, no. I am Lazarus. Come back from the dead. Come back to, I shall tell you also. Oh, yeah, you thought I was dead, but I'm back, baby. Like, I rose from the dead. Like, it's absurd. Like, you never were dead in the first place. You don't have to rise from the dead. It's like, yeah, I'm coming back. Like, and he says, if one selling a pill by her head says, that's not what I meant at all, that's not it at all. Basically, he got friend-zoned. She's like, oh, I'm sorry. I just thought you were going to, like, buy me all these things and, like, this food. And then, like, we're just, like, really good friends. He's like, right, I know. Yeah, it's amazing. So he got friend-zoned. Wait, in his fantasy. And then he has his second. Let's try it again. He revises this idea in his head of what could happen. He's like, no. That was a vision. Let's have a revision. So it literally sounds almost exactly the same yet again, right? As the first, the second, now the third. So it's like he's revising his fantasy. Would have been worth it after all. Would have been worthwhile. He's stuttering. He's jumping over his own lines. It's not going to work. Sunsets, dooryards, sprinkled streets, novels, teacups, skirts falling on the floor. This is so much more. He's frustrated. He's anxious. It's impossible to say what I mean. A magical nail through the nerves and pat would have been worthwhile if one settling a pillow or throwing off a shawl. It's only slightly different. Turning toward the window, I should say. All I do is reverse the words. That is not at all. That is not what I meant at all. So she rejects him twice in his fantasy. In his what could happen. He fails twice. Dude, just ask. She'd probably be like, I mean, I guess. And so this is so crazy. Like, okay, so I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. So who is the star of Hamlet? Prince Hamlet. He says, no. So he's like, in the play that is my life, that is Hamlet, I don't play Prince Hamlet. I get to be an attendant lord. Somebody does a swell of progress to our senior, advise the prince. Sir, a message for you. That's his role in his own life. Is to be like, sir, a message. No doubt an easy tool, deferential, glad to be politic, cautious, meticulous. So he's like a nice guy, full of high sentence, bit obtuse, at times details ridiculous, almost at times a fool. And then he says, he just fast forwards to the end of his life. He's like, oh, I grow older. Like he's thinking like he grows older. And I know he's old, but he's growing older and he feels it. And he's like, how about we accept it? I grow old. What do old people do? I'll wear the bottoms of my trousers roll. That's what I'll do. That's what we do, right? When we're old. And he's like, well, my hair is parted now, so when I'm old, like, do I as it balds backwards, or like when the balding spot comes all the way down, I don't have any hair left over here, and I part it here now. Do I continue to part my hair behind when that's all that's left? Is like that little. Do you part it back here? I don't know. How's that work? He's like, do I dare to eat a peach? Because like at the time, I think peaches, it's like, I don't know, maybe they're still this way. I don't eat a lot of peaches, but like it could give you diarrhea and stuff. It can be tough on you. The eating it fresh off the tree could like be tough on your insides. I guess especially if you're old and have the trouble handling things anymore. And this is what I think he does. Okay, I don't know if this is true, but I like imagining this, right? So he says, do I dare to eat a peach? I mean, I might get like diarrhea or something. Maybe I shouldn't do that. And he says, you know what? No, that's what I'm going to do. That will be my excitement in life. I will eat a peach. It's like imagining intentionally eating a laxative, because it has laxative qualities, peaches do. I will eat a laxative, and then I will wear white flannel trousers. Does anybody wear flannel? If you get water, something liquidy on top of a flannel, it's gonna soak in like pretty obviously to the whole thing. It's gonna be impossible to hide. So you say, I'm gonna wear white flannel trousers, go walk on the beach, far from home. And so I like to imagine him doing, like, he's setting up this scenario, like, I want to go walk on the beach in my white flannel trousers, eat a peach, and see that the drama of my day will be, if I eat a peach and I end up having diarrhea, will I make it home before I crap myself? And that will be my life's drama. And I think as he's having this depressing notion, is that really what's happening? I don't know. But do I love the image of it? Him just saying, this is what my life has been resigned to. This is what I will be. I'm ridiculous. I am the fool. I will poop my pants on the beach. Maybe. If I can't make it back. And then, like, he's standing there and he's like having this depressed idea of like, this is the most my life will ever be. And he looks out and he sees mermaids. Or he imagines seeing mermaids at least. He said, I've heard the mermaids singing each to each. I hear them. He's like, I hear the mermaids. He's like, I don't think they'll sing to me. But if you think, mermaids have like sometimes two functions, right? Mermaids they're a fantasy creature, almost like a muse, like they're inspiring. They're magical. They could bring you joy and inspiration. Or if y'all have seen Harry Potter, we're like, why are the mermaids like that? What happened to Ariel? In that one Harry Potter, they were like sirens, right? They would call you in and then murder you. So either their song is inspiring and makes you think of amazing things, or their song calls you to your death. And he says he has heard the mermaids singing. I think he thinks he has to see the mermaids to have the inspiration, but he's heard them singing. He knows they're singing out there, each to each, not to him. And he says, I do not think that they will sing to me. I don't think they will. Like, they could inspire me. They could even call me to my death. I don't think that they will. I don't think they'll do either. He says, I have seen them riding seaward on the waves. So he sees them out on the waves. They're riding toward the sea, combing the white hair of the waves blown back when the wind blows the water white and black. And I love these two lines here. They're very inspired. The sound, the image is amazing. So the mermaids are combing the white, so it's like they're floating along the waves, combing the white hair of the waves. There's really no white hair. It's like the foam, but he's like imagining it's that way. And the waves kind of look like hair when they kind of blown back. It says, when the wind blows the water white and black, so it's a very tossing sea. And you see white and black water. You don't see black water very often, so it's like you imagine kind of turbulence. But the sounds he uses here, like he did with the scuttling sea, as he starts to become resigned and sad, that's when he writes the most beautiful. And this is amazing what he does here. Look at this. So what are the sounds we hear here? W's, B's, and L's. White hair, waves, blown back, wind, when wind blows, water, white, black. Blah, 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 blah. It's the sound of bubbling water. So he uses sounds that echo bubbling water. Isn't that amazing, like what he does? And then he says, as he's like depressed and thinking about this and how they've done those things, and like, it's also beautiful what he says here, this musing idea that he's got. He says, we have lingered in the chambers of the sea by sea girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown. It's a very interesting line. I've never really known what to do with it. I almost think it feels electrical and humming and buzzing, like it's charged with an energy. You like say it. It almost sounds like to me like rap a little bit, but like early rap, like slower rap. But like the sounds themselves are so compressed and forced together that they are forced out in a particular rhythm or a speed. And there's that kind of goes through like a energetic, like a vibration, a vibrant kind of baritone electrical quality. It's buzzing, basically. And you can't say it like, we have lingered in the chambers of the sea by sea girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown. You can't force it out lightly. It comes out with an edge, almost with the sound of anger, but definitely like a buzzing. We have lingered. It all comes out that sound. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea by seagulls reed with seaweed red and brown. It all comes out with that guttural like that buzzing. It's hard for me to place what that is, but it's like there's an energy charged up and you need to use it, but you can't. You're on the way there. You might be able to do it, but no. And he says, we have lingered in the chambers of the sea by the seagulls wreathed with seaweed red and brown. So we have been out there. We've been in the sea. We've been right next to them. They've been like courting us, like maybe running their fingers through our hair. And I honestly think this is kind of like, he says it like it's the mermaids that are out there and he's being lured out by the mermaids. But if you think of, till human voices wake us and we drown, I think of that moment where Peter is out on the water with Jesus in the boat. He's like, I can walk on water. And somebody says, Peter, you walking on water? He's like, I'm what? And he starts to drown because he realizes what he's doing. Because he did it, but then he starts thinking about it. And like as people start to like tell you, the reality is that human voices wake us and we drown. Basically, that is how all of our lives are, all of our decisions, is that human voices wake us and we drown. We might be able to do great things, but when we imagine how we'll be judged, what people will think, we don't do things, right? We worry how people will think about us, and that dictates what we end up doing. I think of a time when I was, granted, I think this is actually, and it's weird how the perspective makes me think it was a good decision, but I remember how I was really fired up going to like church camps when I was young and like very inspired and like, being a very excited young Christian, I was, getting really into like the Bible and stuff and reading it a lot. And was really enamored with the teachings of Jesus and just the kindness that I saw there. And one time I decided with my fiance, maybe this is one of the reasons I never did it or thought it was a good decision, because it was something that we had decided together. And she was not my wife now, but the other one. And I said, you know what? I want to be a youth minister. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. I want to be just like my youth minister that I have, Joel. And so we went to a restaurant one night, Lone Star Pizza in Commerce, but back when it was in the old location, which is now a sushi or Japanese restaurant. Tokyo Express maybe. And we sat him down and we took him, like, asked, hey, y'all want to go eat dinner? And we went to dinner, and I was going to make this announcement. I said, guys, I want to be a youth minister. And I thought, like, oh, wow, that's amazing, Chris. We really support you. And what I got instead was, oh, yeah, you should probably get a college degree first. Yeah, my youth minister said, I never did get that college degree, and I really wish I would have. Instead, I went and got a seminary degree, and like that's basically all you can do is be a preacher with that. And so I only had that one option. I was like, well, I mean, that's what you're doing now, though, and you like it. He's like, well, yeah, right. But that's all the only option I had. And I was like, okay. My parents were like, yeah, you need a college degree. I mean, what if this falls through? And I was like, yeah, okay, I guess that's right. And so I didn't do it. I became a teacher instead. And don't get me wrong, this is way better. Like, this is honestly exactly what I wanted to do. And weirdly enough, I think I'd already decided I want to be an English teacher at the time I changed my mind and said, oh, I want to be a youth minister. So it was very lucky that I changed my mind back, because this is more what I want to do. Being able to sit here and talk about these people who've had ideas of what it means to be human throughout time, not necessarily under the guise of religion. I don't have to feel like the things that I say are life and death for people. Like, oh, if I say the wrong thing, somebody goes to hell instead of heaven. That would be horrifying. But this is a common idea. Many of you have majors or futures that your parents have picked out for you. They've told you you should do this, and you do it. Like, you're going to take over the family business. Oh, yeah, I want to do that. That's a good idea. And then instead of doing the thing that you really truly would want to do, like if somebody said, well, what if money was no object, what would you do? Like, what would you just do with your time for fun? Besides lay around and watch Netflix. And the idea there is that we're like this all the time, where we worry what people think so we don't do something. Even great things so we don't do. And I think that some of those people who end up becoming like actors and actresses and musicians and stuff, they just can't help doing that thing. And they don't care what people think. And if they do care what people think, it doesn't make them stop doing that thing. They just love doing it. And they can't. Like, I've wanted to write before, but the thing is, I like to have written something. I don't like to write. Writing is a difficult process. And I like being done with it. But at the same time, like, I feel uncomfortable showing it to anybody. So it never happens. Like, how could it? You know? So I feel like a lot of us out there are like this. There's that thing that we want to do. There's that person we want to be, but we're afraid to try because we worry what people will think of us. Till human voices wake us and we drown. We hear what people are thinking and we fall underneath the water like Peter walking out to Jesus. Like, oh no. And what could be inspiring ends up calling us to our deaths. And that's what he thinks. He's like, that thing which inspires you, that thing which really gets your heart rate running, which makes you want and desire and get excited, is the very same thing that can call you to your doom. It's the thing that can destroy you because it can get at you. It can make you vulnerable. And so we worry. We worry all the time. What will people think of me? What will I do? And then it's even worse now in the social media environment, right? So many people are now depressed. They found that Facebook and Instagram, it makes people depressed, but they can't stop using it. It's like depression that they're addicted to. They're not addicted to the depression. It's like it makes them depressed. There was actually, interestingly, a study done where they trained an AI on Instagram and found that it could correctly guess the diagnosis of people with depression 93% of the time or something like that, 90% of the time. Maybe 85%. It was somewhere high, like above the 80s. Correctly diagnose which people it was seeing had depression purely by looking at their public Instagram accounts. It looked at what kinds of photos they were taking, the angles, and how often they were posting. And this artificial intelligence, when showed the accounts of a few people who had depression, could then correctly label other people who had depression as well, based upon what it was trained on, which is crazy. I mean, that's not really irrelevant to hear, because it's not so much about depression, nor is it like about being able to identify things, as much as it is, I guess, that the more, like a lot of people who are out there, like they care what people think. We care what people think. And so people who post constant Instagram, constant, it's like you're trying to convince, I'm happy, everybody, I'm happy, when you're not. And we worry. The human voices, honestly, they wake us and they drown us. Sometimes we shouldn't care what people think. We should just, if you just do something, at least you've done it. But if you worry what they'll think before you've done it, then you've gone through all the active worrying without any of the excuse for having worried. Like, if I break a lamp in my house and I worry what my mom will think about the fact that I broke it and if I'll get in trouble, that's worth the worry, right? But if I don't break a lamp and think, wow, what if I had broken that lamp? And I worry and I get anxious, but never even broke the lamp? Why did I worry? And it's the same here. Like, you try to get her to date you. The best case scenario, you date her. That's good. Worst case scenario, she says no. And either you worry about her saying no, or you worry about her saying no and then you have the confirmation, so at least you know. I mean, you're going to worry either way. You do it, you don't do it. But one has the possibility of greatness. You know, you can write a great poem, get a great girl. Anyways, that's Love Song of Alfred Prufrock. I love it. It's one of my favorite poems. If not, it's very close to the top of my list of favorite poems. I just don't know if it is my favorite poem yet. But that's it for the poems this semester. Don't forget to do the quiz. And I guess the next thing after that is if you haven't already done the research paper and the peer review, the presentation. Anyways, y'all have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful rest of your semester. I mean, you're going to see more videos from me, but this is the last lit video. Bye. I don't know. I'm not ending it that way. That was a weird way to end it. We're going to normal goodbye. Bye. That's bye. No. How does one say bye? Ah, human voices wake us and we drown. Bye. Was that good? I guess. I don't know. Hopefully they'll like it.